In today's episode, we're going to be unpacking how the key ingredient to sustainable change is humility. And humility isn't thinking less of yourself, it's actually thinking of yourself less. And so today I welcome back a special guest for episode 52. It's been an entire year. Thank you so much for your encouragement and support. I've brought back my friend David Higginbotham as we discuss humility could be the difference maker because the quality of your life will be determined by the quality of your relationship. So grab your pen and paper for this one. You're going to want to take notes. I know I did. And also, over the past year, I want to say thank you to the 137,458 of you out there from across the world that have tuned into the podcast channel. I trust that it's positively impacted your lives, that your business, your family, your faith, your fitness, your finances are stronger, and you're in a better place as a result of something that you heard myself or someone else say that I interviewed on the podcast channel. So thank you once again for being here. All right, David, thank you so much for jumping back in with us today for another conversation.
It's my privilege, buddy. It is. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for reaching out to me.
Hey,
I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, David, always. And today we're going after this topic of humility. So I have my pen and paper handy. I look forward to hearing some input and we'll discuss it. Let's start with, how would you define humility, just so we could be speaking the same language?
Good. That's a good place to start. Let me start first of all with a caveat to say I'm not an expert on humility. And as I mentioned to you earlier, I spent significant portions of my life in combat with humility because what I thought of humility as being, I didn't have a good understanding of what humility was. But in recent years, that's been developing and changing. So let me give you what I consider to be my working definition for humility in a particular project that I'm working on. But it's become my definition of humility just in general. And let me just cover that for you.
Please do.
Humility at its core is a state of being modest and respectful, acknowledging one's own limitations and imperfections while recognizing the value and worth of others. It's not about self-deprecation, but rather a realistic perception that avoids arrogance or excessive pride. So humility at its core is related to being modest, which means an understanding of who I am. And one of the ways to put it, and it's one of the ways I'm using in this writing project I'm working on, humility looks like being comfortable in your own skin. You recognize your own talents and abilities and gifts, but you don't feel driven to make sure everybody knows about that. So humility is this, at its core, it's a state of being modest and then respectful of others. So a person who is, by the way, when I think of humility, I'm thinking of it on a spectrum, low to high. Very generic, not a lot of numbers in there, but just low to high. When I think of a person who has a high quality of humility in their life, this is a person who isn't loud and braggadocious about their stuff. They don't talk about, they're not ever trying to convince anybody of their worth or their value or their, for lack of a better word, their contribution that's being made in any situation. They are comfortable in their own skin. They have a sense of who they are, and they're okay with that. And so that's a far broader description of humility than I intended, but I think that covers it pretty well from my perspective.
I think about like Mother Teresa. If I were to think of a person when it comes to the word humility, I don't know much about Mother Teresa, but it's kind of like we were talking about earlier, this person that is just sweet and quiet, very peaceful, and maybe, like you said, sits underneath a tree and reads a book, has a little picnic. And so Mother Teresa is a who that comes to my mind.
I think that's really good because one of the characteristics of humility that I've been working through in my study is they tend to have an others-centered focus. They're not focused on themselves. They're fine. They're themselves. If their jeans are torn, that's okay. If their genes are new, that's okay. But they tend to have their antennas tuned for the opportunity to step into a situation and help someone in need. Mother Teresa's, I think she's probably a good example of that. Again, don't know much about her, like you're saying,
Sure.
other than what the general understanding that we have through news and stories like that. But I think we should think in terms of, describing humility in terms of a number line. Remember math? I didn't warn you there'd be math, but there's going to be some math here. A number line with, imagine with me for just a minute, a number line that has 0 on the left and 5 on the right. So from 0 to 5, a line of numbers from 0 to 5, whole numbers only, please. Okay.
Okay.
0 has no humility. And that's where you would put, the worst narcissist that you know or that you can think of. That's that person. And number 5 would be, in my illustration, that in this project I'm working on, I've got Mother Teresa, interestingly enough,
Okay.
who is an expression of a humble life, a humble servant who engages in helping the poor. And her life is about serving others. So that would be on the high end of the spectrum. And the question that I ask is, where would you put yourself on that? Where would I put David Higginbotham? Well, here's the inconvenient reality of this little exercise. There's no middle number. See, typically, if we're kind of struggling with something, like I said, well, from 1 to 10, where would you put yourself? Well, I would put myself as a 5, because that's a safe place to be. Well, in this little exercise, it requires a bit more thinking, because the things that I'm writing about in this project that I'm working on are hands-on, in-your-face reality kind of things. And humility is just right up at the front. This project I'm working on is about what is it that helps us develop self-sustaining or sustainable change in our lives. And one of those things, that is one of those characteristics that can change our life in massive ways, is learning how to embrace and grow in the capacity in my life to express humility, and have humility as a characteristic in my life, growing and developing. See, because here's the truth, Chris. We all make choices of the person we're going to become. We do. Often, I think most of the time, that's not a conscious choice that we make. But every day we're making decisions that is reinforcing the trajectory that my life is on, or is questioning or perhaps challenging that trajectory that my life is on. And I'm either going to be making a shift away from that trajectory toward what I can now consider to be a better trajectory, such as more toward humility rather than self-centeredness. Because self-centeredness and humility are incompatible together. More toward gratitude than grumpiness. These things in our lives that are expressions of our lives are reinforced, or they are challenged on a regular basis. Sometimes they're challenged by having a conversation with a friend who says something that goes boom. And I'm going, ooh, oh, now do I receive that? Do I respond to that? Do I take that in and start thinking on it? Do I listen to my friend Chris because he's got some perspective? Do I begin to meditate on that? Do I begin to pray or think or read? Is that really true? Oh, you know what? I think he's right. I think he's right. Is awareness, and it's just a little shift in my mindset. But the little shift that's made today, combined with the little shift that's made on Sunday, and then on Tuesday, and then next week, and then at the end of the summer, bit by bit by bit, I'm making a change in my trajectory. You can turn a ski boat around in about 50 feet, full speed.
Sure.
An aircraft carrier takes miles and miles and miles to turn around. Our lives, most of the time, are not turned on a dime. Our lives, particularly in terms of establishing sustainable change, happens gradually. And we go from being arrogant to humble, one step at a time. And so humility is this thing in our life that is either being reinforced by the choices that we make, moving us in that direction, helping someone who needs some help, stopping and helping some little lady out in the grocery store with her who shouldn't be out there in the 100-degree heat with a grocery cart full of stuff, but she's stubborn and she's going to go get her groceries and blah, 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 blah. And so wait, stop and help her get her groceries in, help her get back into her car where air conditioning can cool it down in 3 minutes instead of 10. It's just stopping to help someone. I mean, it's a slight trajectory change. Bit by bit, day by day, we are making choices that will produce the person we will be in 5 years. Now, that's a bit difficult for us to imagine because we're so used to all kinds of problems being solved in a 30-minute TV show or a 90-minute movie. Life functions very differently from what Hollywood would have us believe.
Yeah,
and this is one of those areas.
This year, I've been thinking about how all transformation or all change starts with self-awareness.
Oh, absolutely.
And it sounds like as I go through my mind of any type of quotes or anything that I remember about humility, there's really only one type of quote that comes to my mind that has to do with humility in this moment, is that humility is not thinking less of myself, it's thinking of myself less. And so how do we, I'm curious, David, like why is it so important that I rate myself on that scale? It seems like that would bring some awareness to where I'm at on humility versus what's the word?
Arrogance.
Yeah, there we go. That's easier to say than
arrogance. Yeah.
There we go.
Narcissism is hard to say and hard to spell.
I didn't realize I tried spitting it out.
Yeah.
And
yes, it is.
And so the scale could help me become aware of where I'm at. I could pull my wife and ask her input on that one because she's going to have some input that could help me.
That's a dangerous thing to do, buddy, but that's an important thing to do.
Yeah, that part will not be recorded.
No,
right?
Yeah, we'll not do that.
And yet, so David, how come this is such an important topic for one to consider in life, you think?
It affects every person that you encounter or spend time with or live with. You're going to encounter dozens of people in the next week.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have conversations with a couple dozen people at least in your situation.
Sure.
I'm going to have a conversation. In a standard work week with me, I have an interaction at some level with 25 or 30 people before 8 o'clock in the morning because that's the nature of my job. Now, every encounter that you have with people, Chris, is either going to bring encouragement or a smile or a question that causes them or provokes them to think or a comment that gives them perhaps an alternative point of view about an issue or nothing. Now, humility flavors all of those things except for nothing. And humility allows us to be compassionate when compassion there's an opportunity for compassion. It allows us, it encourages us to be supportive in a situation where someone needs an encouraging word or a pat on the back or simply a hug and no word at all. You see, humility draws us to live a life that is others aware, first level. I'm aware there are other people here who have situations that are different than mine. And ultimately, Others aware is one thing. Others involved is a second level, and others focused is the third. I'm a retired pastor. I don't wear a tag that says that. It's just a part of who I am. So when I'm giving business counsel to people, I've trained business people in 3 different industries over a 35-year period. Okay, so I've always been involved in training of some sort. I never tell people that I'm a pastor, but I bring that heart and the concern for people for where they are. And that gets woven into what I do. It's woven into the conversations that we have here. I'm not trying to sound like a preacher. I try to sound less like a preacher these days, but I can't not sound like a pastor because that's what's in me.
Yeah.
Humility is that characteristic of life which allows what is in you to come out and touch the lives of other people because it recognizes that guy has a need. Do I have an answer? Yes. That answer is encouragement, a smile, a love tap, a hug, a thought. Just thinking about you, I want you to know I'm with you. I've got a friend right now whose wife is dying. A guy from the bus barn where I work. A guy that I trained. I trained this guy. We are friends. He's a dear brother. He loves the Lord. His wife loves the Lord. She may or may not have passed away today. I haven't heard it. I don't know. But she's in that decline. What do you have to say to a guy like that? Thinking about you, bud. Bye. Humility will not allow that to be all you do. Humility draws us into a place of expressing love, acceptance, grace, mercy, peace. I know it does because those are the types of things that Jesus expressed when he encountered people in need. Brokenness, difficulty, disruption, sickness, illness, death. Humility, I think it is the keystone of developing a life that is sustained by the change that humility brings on. There are 5 key things for these changes that need to be happening in our lives. That's the project I'm working on. We'll probably talk about that at some point in the future. But humility is the key. Without humility, without a growing sense of humility, a growing presence of humility in my life, I'm not going to be as attuned to my neighbor as I could be. I'm not going to be attuned to the people that I work with as I could be. And I'm going to miss opportunities to pass on a contact or a conversation or an encounter or the development of a relationship, which could prove to be a legacy from my life and that person's life that goes on for years.
Wow.
You and I had a conversation earlier about a guy that we had been acquaintances for years, and what I described to you was the legacy of negative impact this guy had on people all around him. I mean, our lives leave the thumbprint of who we are on the people that we touch. And I tell you, Chris, we don't want to be down on that scale towards 0. We don't want to leave the thumbprints of a narcissistic, self-centered, holier than thou kind of guy. We don't want that. Nobody wants that. My friend who lived his life that way would tell you, I don't want that. But he didn't have the capacity, or he didn't respond in a profitable way to bring about change in his life so that his life could impact people for good and for blessing and for benefit rather than destruction. Humility, I'm convinced, is one of the keys to making that happen or helping that happen in your life. That's why I think it's a big deal. And that's why I'm telling you, I'm not an expert. I'm a novice. I'm on the journey. you know,
Right.
I'm almost an old guy, but I'm still on the journey. I'm still on the journey, and I will be till they gather around a hole in the ground and wave goodbye to me.
Right. So if somebody rates themselves and they're like, David, if I were being honest, I'm high on the arrogant side of things. What would be a good next step for them if they wanted to make some change, head the other direction, to embrace humility?
If I'm talking to someone who says, I'm really down probably level at least a 2 and probably a 1, my response would be, well, Chris, first of all, how's that working out for you? Pretty happy about that? Wonderful relationships with your children and your wife and your in-laws?
Right.
Hmm? Well, how long do you want to be that way?
Hey, we've had these types of conversations before. You've asked me these questions.
Yeah. Well, yeah. When someone tells me my life is really screwed up, the first thing that comes to my mind after how honest do you want me to be is, well,
Right.
I might ask, well, how long did it take you to get here? How long have you been aimed in this direction? How long do you want to be there? Because, see, frankly, Chris, being inconvenient in the moment is enough motivation for someone to say, I want things to change.
Yeah.
Well, wonderful. That's great. How long has it been? What trajectory brought you here? And how long was that the guiding force in your life? And how badly do you want to change? See, change doesn't happen in our lives because we want it to. It simply doesn't. Change happens in our life because we engage in a process that's going to take us from where we have been headed and take us back in a different direction to where we, at this point, think we want to go. You mentioned the term a while ago, awareness. It begins with awareness, because if you don't know you've got a problem, you're not even going to be considering anything that could lead to change. And so awareness is the initial component of what I call the life change process. Okay, very, very creative.
LCP.
LCP, the life change process. Well, your life doesn't change just because you become aware there's a problem.
That's true.
I mean, well, how long have you had this problem? Well, 5 years, 6 months, and 14 days. Okay, that's pretty clear.
Yeah.
What have you been doing in that 5 years, 6 months, and 14 days to bring about some understanding of what it is that's going on and who's involved and how did I get here? Well, I don't know how I got here, but I got here and I'm still here and I'm asking God to change me and change circumstances. Okay, well, that's not a bad thing, but has it worked? Well,
Right.
no. If I've been doing something 5 years, 6 months, and 14 days, and nothing had changed, I'd probably want to look for something else.
Right.
That might. You see, seeing I've got a problem and wanting change is a good first step. But I have to begin to think in terms of, how did I get here?
Mm-hmm.
What is the core of this problem? You see, my friend that I was speaking to you about earlier knew he had problems, but he was convinced that the source of the problems were always other people, not recognizing that his motives, his attitudes, his actions, his choices. By the way, it's true of all of us. Our motives, our attitudes, our actions, our choices always contribute to where we are, even in a minimal way. And so awareness helps to gather and develop understanding. Understanding gives us the perspective, or a better perspective, of what's actually going on in your life, Chris. Chris, tell me what's going on in your life. Well, man, I don't know. I'm just the problem here and the problem here and the problem there and the problem there. I just feel like the world's caving in on me. Okay, well, that's a bird's eye view. But what about the specifics? You see, most of us don't dig deep enough to begin developing some understanding about what the problem is or what the problems are. And if I can't begin to develop understanding, a perspective that gives me understanding, I'm not going to have any idea about what direction should I begin moving that would help bring resolution to this issue. Well, I don't know. And I don't know because I don't understand. If I understand that I'm having relational problems with my wife and my children, and I'm nervous and jittery all the time, and I'm my life is falling apart. One of the things that might be going on is I might be consuming a 2-liter of Diet Dr. Pepper a day. What's that got to do with it? Well, it's about 10 gallons of caffeine, which could create problems for, you see what I mean? I mean,
yeah,
there has to be a place. Understanding helps me develop some perspective about at least where to begin moving in a different direction. Because as I move in a different direction from the direction that brought me here, I'll be moving myself away step by step from the problem that were created. And I'm always looking for some additional understanding. I have to engage, and this is the third thing, I've got to engage with this and pursue it. And I have to embrace persistence in that journey. You see, when a guy's marriage is falling apart and he's been married for 10 years, well, how were the first 3 years? How were they? Well, they were wonderful. Well, when did things start going bad? Well, about year 5. Well, there's 5 years has been involved in leading up to this devastating problem that's going on in his marriage, and he wants it changed over the weekend. Wrong answer, but thanks for playing. It's just not going to happen. The direction can begin to start changing over the weekend, but the journey to a different place of stability is not going to happen over a weekend. It doesn't happen because I suddenly have perspective and I know how I want things to be. Well, it might take me 18 months or 2 years to get there, because stuff's got to change.
Yeah.
How I talk to my wife. Well, how do I talk to my wife? What do you mean, how do I talk to my wife? What do you talk to your wife with that kind of attitude? She just won't listen to me. Well, you know what? I've discovered over the years, when someone says she won't listen to me, or he won't listen to me, or they won't listen to me, it's because the problem is the person who's doing the speaking in the first place. It's really hard, Chris, for us to embrace the reality that I have been the major contributor to the difficulty and the disruption and the trouble in my life. It's really hard. But taking the steps in that direction to come to the place where I do embrace that and say, yeah, it's me, that brings me significantly closer into that place of humility where I need to be, so that I'm in a position of being able to receive grace. It's simple, but it's not easy.
How come it's hard, do you think, to embrace that?
We're mostly insecure at some level. We just,
Yeah.
if I admit that I've screwed up again, how can I keep going? if I admit to my wife that once again, one more time, I've acted like a jerk,
Mm-hmm.
and I've said things in front of her and the kids that I'm embarrassed about, frankly, and I said I would never do that again, and this is the 6th or 7th time that I've done that after I said I would never do that again. I mean, see, it gets really complicated when we're trying to extricate ourselves from the conflict and the problems that we've gotten ourselves into. It's much easier for me to respond to those problems when I think it's your fault.
Yeah, it's true.
When I have to, it's me. When I have to own, and this is tough on my heart, but when I have to own my own stuff, it'll shock my wife and she may faint. Flat out. What? But see, when I take a step toward humility, I'm in a better place to receive grace. When I resist humility, I'm establishing myself in the throne of pride. And I'm in a place where I cannot receive grace because I've declared I am all I need. Humility is at the core of the kind of life most of us want to have, but we've never really identified it as such. You see, most of us want to have a life where we can flourish, where our marriage can flourish, our relationships can flourish, our relationship with our children can flourish, our relationship with friends and in-laws, people at work, that my life would generally be categorized. If people said, what kind of life is Higginbotham? What do you know? What do you think about it? You know what? The guy just is flourishing. Flourishing is that place where life and vitality are within you, and they are being produced within you, and you can't help but have it spill out. That doesn't happen because you get up on Monday morning and say, I'm going to flourish this week. It's the byproduct. It's not the goal. It's the byproduct. It's the fruit that is produced by a life that recognizes others matter.
Mm-hmm. Man,
I don't have to prove anything to anyone. I don't have to be the smartest guy in the crowd. I don't have to live a life that is addicted, that is addicted to comparison. I don't have to live that way. There is an alternative. You know what? I'm not even really sure what that alternative is, but I'm going to go find out.
Yeah, that's good.
You see, that is taking a step. It's that place where you are, to use an old cliche, sick and tired of being sick and tired. And the direction I'm going has brought me here again. This is clearly not the river cruise I wanted to be on. This is not it. I've got to find a different direction. And when a guy comes to that place, when a woman comes to that place, when a teenager comes to that place, they're setting themselves up for the opportunity to begin changing their trajectory. One little shift at a time. One shift. It's not the answer. It's moving me toward the answer. You see, humility is the goal. I don't know what that's it. But the fruit of humility is the thing I want. Would you like to have the flavor of the people who know you? Not the flavor, the favor of people who know you.
Absolutely.
Do you want to have the respect of the people who know you, your coworkers, your family, your friends? Yeah, all of us want the fruit of humility in our lives. without actually becoming humble.
That's
We
just
live
a
in it.
topic I have heard this is the first time this is the most I've ever heard about humility or being humble in my life. So it's interesting to learn more about this, David, because out of all the word studies, the things I've studied, this is the most I've ever considered the word humility and the word humble.
It's one of the things we know the least about.
I would agree for me personally, yeah.
Yeah, listen, I'm telling you. Sorry.
You're good, David.
My arrogance nearly destroyed my family. My relationship with my kids was deeply wounded. My relationship with my wife was virtually non-existent. And it wasn't because I beat my wife and beat my kids and ran around and drank. The embarrassing thing about this, Chris, is that I'd been in pastoral ministry and church ministry at the time for about 30 years. What's behind the curtain is not always what is presented outside the curtain. Nothing changes. Nothing in my life changes until I begin changing. There is no how to do this. I was having a conversation with a guy about this not too long ago, and he said, well, how can I become more humble?
That's where my mind goes. Yeah.
And I said,
5 steps, man.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I said, you can't.
Mm.
You can learn how to act humble.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't make yourself humble. You can't tomorrow be humble. Well, here's 10 characteristics of humble. I'm going to start doing that tomorrow. Well, good luck with that. It'll be wonderful till it's not.
Yeah.
Humility comes about when I'm trying to be humble, but I humble myself. You see, there's a passage of scripture that tells us, humble yourself in the sight of the Lord. The image is, bring yourself to God. Own your stuff. This is the mess. Humble yourself. Own your stuff. Recognize if you could have acted differently, you would have acted differently. If you could have changed your life, you would have changed your life. If you could have fixed your marriage, you would have fixed your marriage. The bottom line is, none of us have the capacity to do those things that we want to have happen. We need others. We need an interactive relationship with God in our lives. We need friends who will get past our junk, kick our butts, and stay with us.
Mm-hmm.
It's messy. It's not Sunday morning. All of you who want to be humble, stand up. I'm going to pray for you.
Yeah.
Father, make us all humble. Make us more humble than we've been. Go home, go forth, and be humble this week. It don't work that way.
Yeah.
The thing that we have to recognize, Chris, ultimately, is that we are all people with brokenness and pain and failure in our lives. And that is the byproduct of the life that we've been living. We've been on a particular trajectory by the choices that we make today and yesterday and tomorrow. And until those choices begin to change, until our perspective begins to change, nothing about me is going to change because I don't see any need to. I tell you this, I've had hundreds of conversations with men over the years, hundreds, about challenges and issues in their life, and virtually every one of those conversations came about because they were facing a crisis.
Mm-hmm.
They had been living their life in a state of unawareness. This has been going on for a while. But suddenly now they're aware.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly now they want a solution. What they want a solution. You were saying, give me the 5 steps. Okay, step number 1, realize there are no steps.
Yeah.
There's not a solution. There's a journey to be made, my friend. A what? A journey. How far is it? I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? Well, I don't know your stuff. How long did it take you to get to this spot? Oh, the friend that I spoke to you about before we started recording, who died virtually alone.
Mm.
It is my understanding that one of his children did visit him in the hospital. The 4 marriages that he destroyed, they weren't going to be there. That end result was the trajectory not of 50 years. That was the trajectory of 65 years. The trajectory of his life from his early middle school years was beginning to be established by an attitude that was never challenged. It was never put into perspective. And he as you can grow in your understanding and your embracing and your expression of humility, you can grow in your understanding and your depth and your expression of arrogance. So when someone says, how long is this going to take? My thought, and I often ask, is, well, how long did it take you to get here?
Mm.
It took me 25 years to get here. Well, do you think that's going to change over the weekend? You've got patterns in your life that have been established. You've got years of decisions and years of embracing attitudes, motives, attitudes, actions. You have been fertilizing this for decades, and you want it to be changed overnight? Can the process begin? Oh, absolutely. The process. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Because the process begins with making that one shift. The next time there's an opportunity for an argument between me and my wife, and I can see it and I know it's there, I'm going to shut my mouth. Why won't you say something? I'm sorry, sweetheart. I just simply have nothing to say. I don't have anything productive to say. By the way, you're right. Now, be sure that you've got the phone handy because you may need to call 911 when you tell her that.
Yeah.
It's. I did not intend to be this I did not intend to be this intense, but the reality of it is so very near the surface in my life because as I'm writing these things, I'm having to relive the journey that I have been on out of that arrogance and that pride and that hardness of heart. I am right. My position tells me that I'm in charge and you need to do what I tell you to do kind of thinking.
Yeah.
And that journey it's difficult and challenging and fruitful all at the same time. You don't become humble because you want to. Humility is not something you can learn. It is an overflow. It is a fruit. It is something that is produced within you. In the same way, patience is produced within you. You can't just be patient. Now, you can be a little patient because that's the only strength in that every area that you have. You can become more patient.
Mm-hmm.
You can become more humble by cooperating with your Creator, who has given us an incredible example of what it looks like. It doesn't just happen by itself. It happens with your cooperation, with your awareness, with the understanding that you develop, with the engagement that you place into this. I'm going to address this thing. I'm not going to be that way again. I'm not going to be that way anymore. And it may take me a year, it may take me 18 months, but I am going after that. You see, persistence and tenacity is something that's developed in us over time. That baby falls down. I fell down. I'll just crawl. And they crawl for a bit. Well, that's still taking, I want to stand. And they fall down. And then they stand. And then they fall down. But eventually, if they keep getting up and keep engaging with the process, they're toddling around the living room here in just a matter of a week or two. That is the way life is lived in the real world, Chris. It's not lived that way in Hollywood. And it's not lived, frankly, it's often not lived that way from the pulpit. Because our system and our culture has trained us to promise people something that isn't going to happen. It's just simply not going to happen that way. I'm going to pray for you that God give him mercy. God give him patience. God give him humility. God doesn't give us humility. God doesn't give us patience. Patience is developed in the trenches. God says, hey, humble yourself before me. Boy, that's inconvenient. But absolutely necessary.
Man, they're good, David. Thank you.
Well, I should have pulled the cork on the bottle before we started.
Well, I should have put my steel-toed boots on as well, and yet it's all good. David, if people are they want to get to know you a little bit more and take a step that direction, where can they find you, man?
There are two places you can find me most simply on Facebook, David Higginbotham. I've got a podcast with a friend that you can find me on. If you Google David Higginbotham podcast, I'm generally that top
Learning
one that
to
pops.
Thrive.
Learning to Thrive is one of the Learning to Thrive podcast. Yes, and that we called it that. We named I named it. Tom's helping me do it. Tom Kalinov, good guy. I called it that because that was where I was wanting to go at the time. That's where I had been. The trajectory of my life was taking me to Thriveville. That was, and not just for myself, but for my family. And so we called it Learning to Thrive. Nobody thrives apart from the journey, my friend.
Yeah, that's good.
Nobody does. Thriving is the fruit of the persistence that we engage the journey. And so, my friends, if you're listening to this and you want a different life, it's going to come from your engagement with the journey over the long haul. It won't happen by next week. Most of the changes that happen suddenly and unexpectedly in our lives are not positive. They're just not positive. I have a friend now whose wife is dying. Now there's going to be a certain positivity that comes out of that. She's going to go be with Jesus. She won't be in pain anymore. But the family is going to feel the impact of that loss for a long time. change, the kind of change that you want and that I want, it takes a while.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be persistent in our engagement with that journey. And that's the thing I'll leave you with.
That's good. Thank you, David.